Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Claire used to believe she'd already won at life. Ever since she was little, her grandmother had told her that finding true love was like discovering a precious stone at the bottom of a dark lake. She found that love early on, at only 13, when Jake shared his snack with her during school recess. In that moment, between a sip of juice and a piece of sandwich, something different happened. Their connection was natural, easy, like the world had always intended for them to walk together. Over the years, they grew side by side. They walked the same high school hallways, celebrated victories in tournaments, shared frustrations with demanding teachers, and even faced the loss of dear family members together. When Jake proposed to Claire under the tree where they used to study for exams, she cried tears of joy. To her, that proposal was the ultimate proof that true love wasn't a myth. It was possible to spend your whole life with the same person and be happy about it. The wedding was small, surrounded by childhood friends and family who had watched them grow up. The vows they exchanged at the altar were sincere, full of plans and hope. And during the first few years, everything flowed with an enchanting lightness. They cooked together on Friday nights, played board games on Saturdays, and on Sundays, they watched movies wrapped in blankets, as if the outside world had no power to affect them. Their arguments, when they happened, ended in long hugs and comfortable silences. As time went by, responsibilities appeared. Jake's career took off in the tech field, and Claire found stability as a marketing analyst. They bought a modest apartment and remodeled it gradually. Each detail in the decor was a mix of both their styles, motivational quotes on the walls that Jake loved and vintage lamps Claire found in thrift stores. Family visits became monthly, dinners with friends became less frequent, and their routine grew more predictable. That was exactly when something started to change inside Claire. She couldn't say when she first felt that strange tightness in her chest. It wasn't sadness, but it wasn't contentment either. It was more like a silent absence of enthusiasm. The days were good, they still talked at breakfast, they still kissed goodbye, but something inside her asked for more. The problem was, she didn't know what that more could be. Maybe it started with how their weekends always felt the same plans, same jokes, same schedules. Claire started noticing they spent more time talking about bills than about dreams. At night, they lay side by side, but often each was lost in separate thoughts, absorbed by different screens, connected to the world, but increasingly disconnected from each other. One rainy morning, while waiting for the elevator to go to work, Claire found herself staring at her reflection in the polished metal door. For a few seconds, she didn't recognize the woman with subtle dark circles under her eyes, hair tied back hastily, and a distant expression. That version of herself looked tired, as if she were carrying an invisible weight on her back. She was in that frame of mind when she met Brooke. The new hire at the company had boundless energy, an irreverent way of speaking, and a sparkle in her eyes that Claire immediately envied. Brooke was the opposite of everything Claire had been living. In just a few conversations in the cafeteria, Claire discovered her new coworker loved spontaneous trips, electronic music, and existential debates. But what caught her attention most was when Brooke casually mentioned her open relationship, with a calm smile, as if she were just saying she liked sushi. Claire was surprised, maybe even a bit judgmental, but that conversation planted a seed in her mind. She started watching Brooke more closely, listening to her stories with more attention, wanting to understand how someone could be so self-assured living something so different from what Claire always believed was right. And before she knew it, she began comparing. She compared Brooke's carefree laughter to the seriousness that had taken over her home. She compared the freedom with which her coworker talked about desire to the silence that had settled between her and Jake in recent months. Their conversations became frequent and personal. Claire heard about parties, dates, the freedom of choice, and radical honesty. Brooke spoke with such conviction that, little by little, Claire began to question if spending an entire life with one person was really natural or just an idea she'd accepted because she'd started so young. One afternoon, while they were drinking coffee at a cafe near work, Brooke looked at her intently and said, "You seem like someone who's alive on the outside but asleep on the inside. Have you ever thought about doing something just for you, without worrying if it's right or wrong in other people's eyes?" That line stuck to Claire like it was written on her skin. For the first time in many years, she started wondering if she was actually living a choice or just following a path that felt safe. That night, when she got home, Claire watched Jake make dinner, like he did every Wednesday. He was humming an old song, focused, without realizing that the woman next to him was starting to see their marriage as a story that might need a new chapter, or a final page. Claire rehearsed the conversation for days. Alone in the car, in the shower, while folding still warm clothes from the dryer. She thought about writing a letter, considered starting with a joke, even thought about bringing it up during a special dinner, hoping the pleasantness of the meal might soften what she was about to say. But none of those approaches felt right. Whenever she imagined Jake's face after hearing her words, her stomach twisted uncomfortably, like she was about to destroy something precious with her own hands. On that cloudy Tuesday, after a tense day at work, Claire came home determined. Jake was on the sofa, laptop on his lap and bare feet resting on the coffee table. The light from the TV flashed in bluish tones, reflecting on his face as he typed away. She watched him for a few seconds before speaking up. Her voice came out softer than she'd planned, almost shy, as if asking permission to enter forbidden territory. She said she needed to talk. He closed his computer immediately, like he always did when he sensed something was bothering her. It was just his habit, being present when she needed him, even if he didn't know what it was about. She started slowly, mentioning the routine, how she missed something different, some experience that would take them out of their comfort zone. Jake nodded, thinking she meant a trip or a new activity for them to do together. Then Claire said it, "Have you ever heard of open relationships?" The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. Jake looked at her with narrowed eyes, trying to figure out if she was serious. Realizing she was, he sat up straighter, crossed his arms, and asked, his voice restrained, what exactly she meant by that. Claire explained, like someone walking over broken glass. She told him about her talks with Brooke, about the parties, about modern couples, about a new meaning that could exist between love and freedom. She said maybe trying something new together could help them find the spark that once felt so natural. Jake listened quietly, blinking less often than usual. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. He said he felt betrayed, even though she hadn't actually betrayed him. That the idea seemed more important to her than everything they'd built together. He didn't yell or storm out. He just took a deep breath and said he needed time to think. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, separated by more than just a few inches. There was a world of doubt between them. Despite how uncomfortable it was, Claire felt a strange sense of relief for having been honest. She believed Jake would understand in time. Meanwhile, he lay there in silence, wondering where things had gone wrong. He mentally replayed the last few years, searching for signs that their love had been falling apart without him noticing. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at home was tense. Their conversations were short and mechanical. Meals, which used to be filled with shared stories and laughter, were now punctuated by the clinking of silverware and the low music from the kitchen radio. Claire tried to stay calm, hoping time would help him process everything. Jake, on the other hand, threw himself into work, spending extra hours at the office, trying to escape the anguish inside him. When Brooke found out about their talk, she was enthusiastic. She said Jake needed to open his mind, that many couples found themselves stronger after exploring new horizons. Claire, uncertain, clung to her friend's words like someone trying to keep balance on a tightrope. She wanted to believe it was still about love, that maybe this idea could rekindle something, save what was left. One afternoon, coming back from the grocery store, Claire found Jake in their home office, looking through an old photo album. The images showed trips, birthdays, and simple moments like the day they put their living room shelves together. When he noticed her there, he closed the album and looked at her with an expression that was different, not angry, but deeply sad, the kind that doesn't shout but presses in until it leaves you breathless. That was the first time Claire wondered if she had crossed a silent line that should never be crossed. But at the same time, the thought of going back felt suffocating. Doubt grew inside her like ivy, spreading everywhere. Deep down, she still believed that if they tried this together, they might find each other again. And so, caught between a deepening emotional distance and her push to revive a marriage on the brink of stagnation, Claire took another step towards something even she couldn't define. Brooke's next invitation, bolder than all the others, would be decisive. And even though Jake hadn't agreed right away, Claire's restlessness would eventually make him consider the unthinkable. Jake took 3 days to respond. 3 days without saying more than absolutely necessary, sticking to a muffled, "good morning," or a, "yeah, I'm fine," while staring at his phone. Claire respected his space, but each second of silence was like a drop of water carving through the rock of her own conviction. When Jake finally spoke, he got straight to the point. He said he would go to that party, but made it clear he was doing it for her. Only for her. Without enthusiasm, without promises, with no guarantee that it would make sense to him. On the night they were supposed to go, Claire spent almost an hour deciding what to wear. It wasn't just clothing, it was a statement. She wanted to look confident without seeming desperate. She wanted to stand out, but not too much. She wanted Jake to look at her the way he had in their early years, with admiration, with desire, with that sparkle that said, "I choose you every day." When she walked out of the bedroom, he was already waiting in the living room, wearing a dark button-down shirt and jeans. He looked handsome, but his gaze was distant. A man moving on the outside but stumbling on the inside. They drove in silence. The GPS spoke more than they did. Claire tried to comment on a song playing on the radio, but Jake just gave a slight smile, like he was listening out of obligation. The address led them to an elegant house, away from downtown, lined with tall trees and automated gates. As they got closer, Claire felt a mix of excitement and guilt. Jake gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles almost white. They were welcomed by a friendly couple with broad smiles and inviting eyes. The inside of the house was sophisticated, warmed by soft lighting, background music, and a mild sweet scent that seemed to drift through every corner. Well-dressed people chatted in groups, some seated on plush sofas, others holding wine glasses, all appearing entirely comfortable in that setting, which, for Claire and Jake, was unfamiliar ground. Brooke was there. She wore a fitted jumpsuit, high heels, and dark red lipstick. When she saw Claire, she lit up and walked over, greeting her with an easy hug. Jake stayed a few steps behind, watching everything closely. When Brooke turned to him and held out her hand, the contact was brief, formal, almost cold. Claire tried to lighten the mood with a casual comment, but the air around them was already too heavy. As they walked through the house, Brooke explained how things worked. There were rules, social areas, and private spaces for those seeking more intimacy. Everything was based on consent, and there was no pressure. Claire took in every word, trying to act comfortable even though her heart was pounding. Jake followed quietly, just observing. At one point, a couple approached them. They were polite, charming, talking about movies, hobbies, even cooking. The man complimented Claire's necklace, the woman remarked on Jake's eyes. Their words were kind, but carried an undercurrent both Claire and Jake immediately sensed. Claire felt Jake's shoulder tension rise. He smiled politely, responded graciously, but each sentence felt like a step through a minefield. Claire tried to pull him aside for a private conversation. They found a quieter corner of the house, near an unlit fireplace. She asked if he wanted to leave, if this was too much for him. Jake hesitated before answering. He said he was trying, but he felt out of place. He used the word invasion to describe how it felt having strangers scrutinize their relationship. Claire, torn between wanting to explore and seeing the silent plea in Jake's eyes, took his hand. He let her. They spent a few more minutes trying to socialize, but Claire's attention seemed divided between other people's interest in her effort to keep Jake somewhat comfortable. Brooke passed by them once or twice, giving looks that sometimes felt encouraging, sometimes judgmental. Claire wondered what she was doing there. She had pictured this moment as a potential fresh start for the marriage, a bridge to something new. Yet everything there only highlighted how fragile their once solid bond had become. Jake, without a word, slipped away. Claire noticed when she turned and realized he was gone. She looked for him, weaving through groups of people, asking discreetly. She found him sitting in their car, elbows on the steering wheel, his face buried in his hands. His expression shattered something inside her. It was like he'd taken an invisible punch that knocked the wind out of him. She got into the car without saying anything. She just looked at him. He stayed like that for another minute before turning the key and driving away. The ride home was even quieter than the drive there. There was no music. Headlights from other cars flashed past the windows like fleeting ghosts. When they arrived home, Jake went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a backpack, and started throwing some clothes into it. Claire, shocked, tried to figure out what he was doing. Jake looked at her with red eyes and said he needed time away. That he was losing himself in that attempt to be someone he wasn't. That it hurt him more than he thought possible. He said he loved her, but loving someone didn't mean erasing yourself completely. He zipped the bag closed and walked out, giving her one last weary look. Claire stood in the living room, staring into space, hearing the silence of the apartment, louder than she'd ever heard it before. A week passed after Jake walked out, and the apartment still carried his presence, like time had frozen. His clothes were no longer in the closet, but his scent still clung to the pillows. The silence, once uncomfortable, now felt permanent. Claire didn't expect any messages, but every notification on her phone still made her heart skip a beat, only to plummet when it wasn't him. On a gray Friday afternoon, he showed up again. No warning, no request. He just rang the doorbell like someone who still had the right to be there. Claire opened the door, feeling a mix of hope and fear. Jake had stubble on his chin and tired eyes, but his posture was steady. She let him in, and they sat at the kitchen table like they had so many times before, only now on different sides of life. Jake didn't mince words. He said he'd thought it over, tried to understand, even tried to envision a way back. But he'd figured out he was broken inside. He said the love was still there, but it had turned into something painful. In his view, getting a divorce was the only way to preserve the little respect they still had for each other. Claire listened in silence. Her mind told her to accept, but her heart begged for one more chance. She tried to hold back tears, but they slipped out quietly, as if apologizing as they fell. He stood up, and their eyes met for the last time in that house. And that was it. No big drama. No hugs. No promises of future friendship. Just the sound of the door shutting for good. Claire spent the rest of the day quiet, in a sort of suspended state. That night, she called Brooke. She just needed someone there. Brooke arrived in under half an hour, bringing wine and gentle words. They sat on the couch and talked for hours. Claire cried, gave a half-hearted laugh, and at one point declared firmly, "I know I messed up trying to be someone I'm not. These parties, that lifestyle, it's not for me, Brooke. I want to stay your friend, but all that world, it doesn't fit me." Brooke understood. She looked at Claire sincerely and said she respected that. That she would never force her into anything. For a while, their friendship got stronger, built on more honest ground, free of expectations and judgments. Claire clung to that. Her routine started getting some color again. She began therapy, went back to reading, and slowly, the broken woman she was started piecing herself back together. Months went by, and life moved on for Brooke as well. One day, as they were chatting and laughing over coffee in the late afternoon, Brooke shared the news that she was dating someone. He was a real estate agent, charming, mature, and considerate. Before long, they were engaged. Claire was genuinely happy for her, but a question kept nagging at her. When she finally got up the courage, she asked directly, "So, is he into that lifestyle, too? Are you guys going to have an open relationship?" Brooke's answer was quick, firm, and flat: "No way. He's a decent man. It's hard to find a man like that these days. He'll never know I went to those places." Claire's world spun. Those words hit like a slap. Every word was a blow to everything Claire thought Brooke stood for. All the support, the freedom, the push for Claire to seek new experiences, it all suddenly felt like affront. A life Brooke had only tried on, never truly lived. Claire felt her anger rise. "So it was easy for you to play revolutionary with my life, right? Easy to push others over the edge while you stayed safe on the shore. I destroyed my marriage thinking that was freedom, and now here you are, getting married to someone who doesn't even know who you really are." Brooke tried to respond, but Claire was no longer listening. Her fragile world shattered a bit more. Anger replaced the sadness. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and left without looking back. Another door closed in Claire's life. This time, the door to the friendship she'd seen as her last anchor. Now, all she had left was herself, no husband, no friend, and the pain of having trusted someone who, in the end, had been wearing a mask so well made it barely looked like a disguise at all. That was when, alone again, Claire realized the hardest lesson: when we drift away from who we really are just to please others, we risk losing everything, even our own essence. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.